In a recent class I'm teaching here at church, a question came up about Mary, and so I'd like to talk about that question in today's episode. Stay tuned. Hello friends, Pastor Tim Westermeyer here. Thanks for spending some time with me today. For the last few weeks here at St. Philip the Deacon, I've been leading a class on something called the Nicene Creed, which is one of the foundational documents of our Christian faith. Last night, or the night before we are taping this, the following line came up in that class. This is right about in the middle of the Creed. It's the section about Jesus. For us and for our salvation, he came down from heaven, was incarnate of the Holy Spirit and the Virgin Mary, and became truly human. So that line, of course, mentions the Virgin Mary. And so it prompted a question from someone in the class, actually a whole table of people in the class, to say, well, you know, Tim, and again, I'm a pastor of a Lutheran or a Protestant church, St. Philip the Deacon, a Lutheran church. And so they're like, what's up with this whole Mary thing as it relates to Catholics? And I think they may even have said, why do Catholics worship Mary? And so, given that we're still talking about questions at this point in these episodes, I thought, well, maybe if that came up in last night's class, other people also have that question. And so, briefly, I'm going to share with you the response I gave to them last night, which begins with sort of the history of the Reformation. And again, the Protestant Reformation began symbolically in 1517 with Martin Luther nailing his 95 Theses to the castle church door at Wittenberg against indulgences. And right away what that did was it sort of drew battle lines between Catholics on the one hand and what came to be known, although it was a decade or so later, what came to be known as Protestants or reformers, right? And when those battle lines are drawn, what is each side trying to do? Each side is trying to say, I'm more right than you. I have a claim to the authority of the ancient faith that's more honest and more truthful and more faithful than you do. And so that comes down to things like, well, which books are in the Bible? Or how are we going to worship? And what do our churches look like? And what are we going to sing? And how are we going to sing? And one of the things that ends up coming up in that whole discussion is, well, what's the role of Mary? And the Protestants tended to diminish her role, I would say, historically, and the Catholics tended to elevate it. Again, in part, I'm not saying this is the whole story, but in part as a way to say, we're different than you. We are more correct in our understanding of faith than you. And that has come down, that sort of argument, that fight, has come down now after 500 years to come to a question like, I heard last night, why do Catholics worship Mary? And the first thing to be said about that is that they don't. Catholics do not teach that Mary is God. They don't teach that she is the Father, the Son, or the Holy Spirit, nor do we as Protestants. But as Protestants, it seems to me, after 500 years, we could probably take a cue from the fact that Catholics do have this, I think, appropriate instinct to recognize that Mary has this critically important role to play in bringing God into the world. After all, as Christians, we all celebrate Christmas. Last time I checked, Mary has a kind of central role. And so I'm not sure why, as Protestants, we wouldn't affirm and celebrate with our Catholic brothers and sisters that critical role. And again, that's biblical, right? In the Gospel of Luke, we are reminded the angel comes to Mary and says, greetings, favored one, or hail, Mary, full of grace. The Lord is with you. That's very high praise from the Bible itself about this central character in the New Testament witness. And if our Catholic brothers and sisters approach that a little differently, that's okay. And we shouldn't throw stones at them for that. And I guess the final thing I'll say is that in our culture, it seems to me, and I'm not moaning or whining about this, this has maybe always been thus, but in our culture, people look at organized religion with suspicion and cynicism, largely. And as Christians, I think we do ourselves no favors by throwing stones at other Christian traditions other than our own. I think far better for us to look at those other Christians as brothers and sisters and do what we can to live with them in peace and humility, recognizing that maybe each tradition has its own strengths and that we should learn from them. So I hope that's helpful as a response to the question I got last night. If you have further questions about that or anything else, as always, I'd love to hear from you. In the meantime, be well, stay in touch, and God bless.